The next speaker I'd like to introduce, he is the pastor at Oasis Church in White Sox, but first and foremost, he is my friend. Tim holds a degree at Binghamton University. He has a bachelor's of science in computers. He is a software engineer. He was employed at Lockheed Martin for several years. He was frontline management. He felt called to ministry. He left that career behind. I just am grateful to be a member of Oasis Church and have Tim as my pastor. So without further ado.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you for putting this summit together. I think this is a really God-ordained thing. So I really appreciate your heart for this area, for the youth, and for what you're doing today. I believe that God gifts every entrepreneur with an inherent capacity to generate income and even wealth without necessarily collecting a steady paycheck from someone else. I think that's what defines that kind of category of person. They have a gift from God to go and just create wealth and create income and financial provision even without being on payroll. I believe that, like any gift that comes from God, the gift works best when we include Him in the way we use that gift. I guess that's really the heart of what I want to share, is what that looks like or what it could look like. And when I was 21, I was just getting ready to graduate from Binghamton University. And at the time, I was living with 4 other roommates in this little house. And so my expenses were very low. And for my age, my income was going to be pretty solid to start off. And I remember just like hanging out with my friends during that period of time. And at one point, one of the young ladies that we were spending time with, she was like, oh yeah, if I were going to buy a house, I would buy a 2-family. And I would just live in one section of the house and I'd rent out the other and it would pay for itself. And like, I wasn't necessarily looking for God's direction, but I heard it. There was a moment like in my heart that I could feel this persuasion, this drive, this life that was like on that idea. I decided right then and there that was what God had for me. So within less than a year of working, this job and having such low expenses, I was able to buy a 2-family. I wasn't experienced or necessarily knowledgeable in investments or real estate or anything like that. I was definitely in some ways getting in over my head, but I remember the real estate agent I used was also my pastor and my friend. So it's a multifaceted relationship. And I remember I was just asking him like, hey, like, what would you do if you were me? And he's like, well, I'll tell you the first thing I would do. I would not get a 30-year mortgage. Get a 15-year mortgage. He's showing me the numbers. It was like, here's for your mortgage, your percentage rate and cost of the house. Like, it was so tempting for me to pick the lower monthly cost. And yet he's like, look at the amount of interest you're going to pay. At that point, I wasn't necessarily like smart enough to like go and ask God directly certain questions, but I was really open to hearing His voice through the wisdom and counsel of other people. When God gives you a gift, and then He's trying to prompt you in a certain way to use that gift, I think something happens inside of our hearts where like there's this drive to respond. Like the Bible says faith comes by hearing, and hearing comes from the word of Christ. Like if you're at a crossroads and you have to make a decision, do I go left or do I go right? His peace will begin to accompany the choice of the decision, the path that you're supposed to go down. And I think just slowing down and paying attention to those moments. And then over time, I've learned to actually specifically like direct my attention and focus toward Him and ask, what are you saying about this? Or what would you have me do in this situation, whether it's an investment or a business opportunity or whatever it may be? Those set of decisions, like early on when I was 21, 22 years old, that ended up shaping my entire financial future. Yes, now I'm full-time in ministry. That's like what I feel called to do, and that's my passion. And the greatest job that I've ever had is being able to serve God full-time. I wouldn't be able to do that, at least not in the way that I'm doing it now, if I wasn't listening along the way. And I didn't do it perfectly. It's not like I didn't make mistakes. And but there's grace for the journey. There's grace for the process. If we seek him first and his righteousness, his ways, then everything else, see, all these other things that you need, all these other things that you're juggling. And so it's really just about allowing him to have sway and say over your path and your journey and the way you use the gifts that he's given you. Another facet of this for me, I'm now making a solid income as an engineer, and then I also have this rental thing going on where it's kind of paying for itself along the way for the most part. I was financially positioned to have some leeway with how things worked, and something that I feel like God put before me very early on, and that again really shaped the rest of the journey. In Proverbs 19, verse 17, it says that he who's kind or generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward you for what you do. Even things like generosity and giving became part of what I would intentionally do with finances. And I just watched the Lord's hand multiply and bless what was on my plate. And then now I've owned multiple rental properties. And when I left Lockheed, it was me looking for God's voice, but on paper, it made so little sense for me to do that. Like I gave up probably $100,000 worth of annual income. That was, I think, 4 years ago now almost. My net worth continues to click up in this like doesn't make sense kind of way, even though on paper my income is way lower than it would have been if I were working the other job. I guess where I'm going with this is like even using what you do have to be generous to those around you, especially people in need. And we've heard a kind of an echo there through some of the other speakers. And I know Chris and Jay were definitely highlighting that as well. But the idea of using what God puts before you as actually an opportunity to bless other people or bless things that are advancing his purposes and his kingdom on the earth, that's made all of the difference in my own life. I guess the last kind of leg of this that I want to share from is when things go wrong, when the storm comes. I have an example from like my rental property business. There were a real storm, like in 2011, the Binghamton area got flooded, and the one rental property that I actually started with got just totally obliterated by this flood. As the water came in all the way up through the basement into the first floor. Basement has, is a 2 families, it's 2 furnaces, 2 hot water heaters, washer, dryer, appliances, all the electrical work, two electric panels, all of it. Totally ruined. First floor, the hardwood floors are just trashed, mold everywhere. And I didn't have flood insurance. An insurance adjuster that was a friend just do a walkthrough and said, yeah, if I were doing a claim, this would be at least $50,000 worth of damage. And at that point, I was in my like mid-20s or something like that. I didn't have a ton of money saved yet. I couldn't just absorb a $50,000 blow. What I could do is I could prep. And I remember just like being careful even with how I stated things. And like whenever somebody's like, what are you gonna do? I don't understand, this is terrible. I'd be, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I do know that God's faithful. And I do know that he works good through all things for those that love him and are called according to his purpose. Even the idea of like not letting your heart go into this place of like complaint or negativity or defeat, and instead directing your heart even by what you say toward trust and recognizing God's faithfulness and his goodness, that ended up shaping the journey through that trial. And that storm, that trial, that flood, it was unpleasant in every way, but that I was in that basement, slapping through the mess and cleaning up and just trying to make it all work. But like at the end of that flood kind of scenario, I ended up making money off of the flood, which doesn't make any sense. But somehow, like, I got insurance money even though I didn't have flood insurance. I had Energy Star appliance rebates that were special, like for the flood, like some New York State program or something. They were giving these rebates that were as much as the appliance cost themselves. And so like I was getting friends and like work donating time and helping me with their different, I had an electrician friend, but all this kind of stacked together in a way where I did the math and I'm like, I actually made like $200 off this one somehow. And like, again, I would never sign up for that trial, but yet God was faithful as I trusted him and as I leaned towards him, even in the face of being in some, a difficult scenario. And so all that to say, like, I guess my story, my journey has been about learning to like look for God's leading. Each of us have gifts, each of us has strengths, each of us have things that are from him. Those things are going to work well regardless, but if you and I include him on purpose in those things, they go to the next level. It goes exponentially higher. And my journey has really been the process and sort of learning how to do that. I think you don't ever like stop learning, but like you do start to pick up things like, okay, when he's prompting me, when he's tapping me on the shoulder, this is what it tends to look like or feel like. Or like, oh, okay, like this is what generosity in a way that honors God looks like in my life. And it's going to look different for each of us. And he's going to put certain things and people and situations before each of us if we're open to it, as he taps us on the shoulder and says, hey, you could help here. Hey, you could be a part of the solution. Or he blesses that responsiveness. He blesses that heart posture that wants to partner with him. And Chris was saying, blessed to be a blessing. Well, not to just accumulate income and wealth and finances just for selfish gain, but to actually be positioned to help others. And we've heard that, I think, a few times throughout the morning as well. So that's kind of my journey and process, and it's an ever winding upward spiral of figuring it out. Sometimes feeling like, well, this looks a little bit the same, but you find yourself little by little growing and developing and learning how to represent God well and how to partner with him well. And the benefit and reward of being a responder in his voice is just tremendous.